In the mid-20th century, General Motors ruled the American car market. They were the undisputed champions of the automotive world, dominating the streets and the industry. But behind the shiny chrome and roaring engines, there was a battle brewing, one that would change the future of car design forever. It all started in 1965. At the time, GM was making massive profits, and their cars were the go-to choice for families, businesses, and enthusiasts alike. The company was the epitome of success. But lurking in the background was a small, relatively unknown company that would take on the giant. Chrysler. Chrysler, trying to break through and prove it could stand toe-to-toe with GM, had created something bold, something innovative. It wasn't just another car, it was a design revolution. Chrysler's new car was so distinct, so different from anything GM had ever done, that it caught the attention of GM's executives, and not in a good way. GM wasn't thrilled with the idea of a competitor introducing something new that could steal their spotlight. So GM did what any giant would do. They used their massive power to squash the competition. They decided to go after Chrysler, claiming that the design of their new car was too similar to GM's. GM argued that Chrysler had copied their design, specifically the curved lines and the sleek rooflines that were becoming a signature of the era. They accused Chrysler of copying not just ideas but whole elements that GM had spent years perfecting. This wasn't just a small disagreement. This was a full-fledged lawsuit, a battle between two giants in the automotive world. GM wanted to make an example of Chrysler and stop their innovative designs before they could take off. They believed that if Chrysler was allowed to release their car, it would hurt GM's future sales and hurt their dominance over the market. The lawsuit didn't just focus on this one car. It was about the future of automotive design itself. The argument was simple. Who owned the rights to car design? Did a company like GM, with its legacy and massive influence, have the right to control what ideas could be used and what could not? Chrysler fought back hard, not only because their future depended on it, but because they truly believed that their design was unique. They argued that GM was just trying to shut them down out of fear, not because they had a legitimate claim. Chrysler wasn't going down without a fight. The case made headlines across the country. It was no longer just about two companies arguing over a car design. It was about innovation, creativity, and the limits of corporate power. Could one company claim ownership over an entire era of design? Was this lawsuit going to change how cars were built forever? The outcome of this lawsuit would impact not just GM and Chrysler, but every car manufacturer in the world. The design rules were about to change, and so was the entire automotive industry. The courtroom battle between GM and Chrysler wasn't just another lawsuit. It was a war over the future of car design. With both companies digging their heels in, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The entire automotive world was watching, waiting to see if GM's massive influence could crush Chrysler's innovative spirit. As the case progressed, it became clear that GM wasn't just trying to stop Chrysler's car from hitting the market. They were fighting a battle for control over what could be considered a new car design. GM had been the leader in the automotive industry for decades, but Chrysler was pushing the envelope, trying to create something that could challenge GM's dominance. And that's what scared GM the most. Chrysler was doing something that had never been done before. They weren't just copying, they were creating something fresh, something that could shake up the entire market. Chrysler, on the other hand, didn't take the lawsuit lying down. They came out swinging. Their defense was simple yet powerful. They weren't copying GM, they were innovating. The car in question wasn't a clone of GM's designs. It was a product of years of research and creativity. Chrysler argued that the industry had always thrived on pushing boundaries, taking risks, and challenging the status quo. To stop them now would be to crush that spirit of innovation that had driven the industry forward. The court case grew more heated by the day. The media picked up on every detail, and soon, the battle was bigger than just GM versus Chrysler. It became a symbol of the struggle between old established companies and newer, more creative competitors trying to make a mark. The outcome of the case could have a lasting impact on how all car manufacturers approach design, and whether they had the freedom to explore new ideas without fear of being sued. Then, the turning point came. The judge ruled in favor of Chrysler. The court found that while there were some similarities between the two cars, they were not identical enough to warrant GM's aggressive legal action. Chrysler had successfully argued that car design, especially in the fast-evolving muscle car era, was open to interpretation and innovation. The ruling shocked the automotive world. This victory wasn't just a win for Chrysler. It was a victory for innovation. It meant that car manufacturers could now create freely, without the constant fear of a giant like GM coming after them. It opened the door for a new wave of creativity and competition. No longer would companies be afraid to challenge the established rules of car design. The lawsuit had set a new precedent, and the future of car manufacturing would never be the same. But while Chrysler celebrated, the impact on GM was massive. This loss wasn't just about one lawsuit. It exposed a vulnerability in GM's position. For years, they had been able to dictate the direction of the industry. Now, they had been forced to admit that their monopoly over car design wasn't as secure as they had thought. In the aftermath of the lawsuit, GM had to re-evaluate their approach. They realized that they couldn't simply rely on their size and power to control the market anymore. The winds of change were blowing through the auto industry, and GM had no choice but to adapt to this new reality. They had lost the battle, but in the grand scheme of things, they were about to experience a shift in thinking that would lead to even bigger changes. When Chrysler won the lawsuit against GM, it was more than just a victory in the courtroom. It was a signal that the automotive industry was entering a new era. Chrysler's win opened the floodgates for innovation, and the entire car design landscape began to shift. Car manufacturers no longer had to worry about being stifled by the giants like GM. The court ruling gave smaller companies, and even the upstarts, a chance to challenge the status quo. But the impact went deeper than just freeing up design ideas. The case sparked a chain reaction that completely redefined how cars would be conceived, built, and sold. The result? A wave of new, daring designs and concepts that pushed the boundaries of what cars could look like and how they could perform. Chrysler's victory encouraged other manufacturers to take risks too. They realized that they now had the legal protection to bring fresh, exciting designs to the market without the constant threat of being sued by the dominant players. This led to an explosion of creativity. Companies that once played it safe now began to experiment with bold new ideas, knowing that they were protected by the law. GM, despite losing the lawsuit, had no choice but to adapt. They could no longer rely on their size and influence to keep smaller competitors from challenging them. GM had been forced to play by new rules, and this would have a profound impact on their approach to car design moving forward. Rather than stifling innovation, GM now had to get on board with the idea that the future of the automotive industry depended on change and fresh ideas. The biggest shift came in the form of muscle cars. The muscle car era had already begun, but with the lawsuit's outcome, car manufacturers started thinking bigger. They began to take more risks with design and performance, resulting in some of the most iconic cars of the 1960s and 1970s. One such car was the Chevrolet Camaro, which GM introduced in 1967. The Camaro was developed in direct response to the Ford Mustang. But after the lawsuit, GM started thinking outside the box with its design. The Camaro's aggressive lines, powerful engine options, and bold styling wouldn't have happened if GM had stuck to their old ways. The victory of the lawsuit made them realize that to stay competitive, they needed to embrace new ideas, not shut them down. But it wasn't just the Camaro that changed the game. Chrysler, now emboldened by their success in the lawsuit, launched a series of innovative cars, including the Dodge Challenger and Plymouth Barracuda, which became staples of the muscle car era. These cars were no longer about just going fast. They were about pushing the limits of design and performance in a way that hadn't been seen before. The lawsuit also changed how cars were marketed. Manufacturers realized that the public wasn't just looking for functionality. They wanted cars that reflected their personal style, their taste, and their sense of rebellion. Advertisements started to focus more on the emotional appeal of cars, showcasing their power, speed, and individuality. The design wasn't just about performance, it was about making a statement. As the decade progressed, the industry continued to evolve. The lawsuit had proven that no car manufacturer had a monopoly on creativity. The days of one company dictating what cars should look like were over. Each new design built upon the last, creating a ripple effect that would shape the future of car design for decades to come.